Hello everyone, this is Galen Martling. I'm showing beautiful deer and woodland scene building today. I'm using a few different techniques, all in one card and all in one layer. The other thing I did was add a sentiment on a little label, but that can easily be done by stamping directly onto the card front. So I'm just showing the main process is all one layer, and you can get a lot in one simple card front. So I'm starting with stenciling. This is the stencil by Unity. I'm using light gray ink on the tops of those slopes. That ink is going to separate the slopes, and it's going to give like a shadow, more of a look of depth maybe. I like it. I like using gray against white when I'm trying to accent something. Sometimes it's an accent around a stamp. Sometimes it's a stencil on white for snow. So I think it works out really well. I like it. So I use this often in gray. And then if you're not going to use a die cut for the slopes and you want a stencil, I recommend using the gray to accent it. It gives depth and dimension without having to do dies and adding bulk to your card. So the next thing I'm going to do is build the sky. I wanted a night scene, a night sky, and so I'm going to use a medium and a blue ink. So I started with the medium and I used the darker color towards the top. And then I try to get as close as I can to the slopes, but I like the bottom to stay light, mimicking maybe a night, a city lights maybe in the background or something like that. It looks nice that way when you leave the light towards the bottom. Now I'm going in with that darker shade of blue. I'm using dye inks and I'm using Catherine Pooler inks. I love the way they blend, but if you have distress inks or any dye inks, you can do the same thing, the same techniques. You use what you have and build from there. Now you want to make sure if you're using inks, you want to dry and heat set the ink really good before you move on to heat embossing so that your embossing powder doesn't absorb any of the color. Sometimes if you get to it quick enough, you can set the ink color, and if you want to quickly go ahead and heat emboss your embossed stamping. We're going to do metallic ink stamping in gold for the deer. This is going to be really shiny and nice. With the metallic ink, you have to clean your stamps right away or it will stay. And so I added a clear embossing powder to the reindeer after it was stamped. And then I heat set that, and it just is ready for me to add more layers. It's great. With metallic ink, you've seen me probably in the past use fixative spray. That is something you can use if you don't want to heat emboss over that gold. This time I did want to heat emboss over it. I wanted to keep adding layers, and I'm going to heat emboss these trees as well. So the trees are going to be white, and they are stamped using white pigment ink. And I carefully straighten the trees, and I also have a little stamp that sort of mimics snow, and so you can stamp that. I'm going to place that snow in different places and restamp that, and I am going to add another tree to the mix. And so you see, this is pigment ink on dark, and now when I heat emboss in white, it's going to show even much more brighter white. And so you just add as many snow elements you want and as many trees. And then after you stamp, you carefully add white embossing powder this time. And you add that wherever you'd like. And you want to use a little brush. I use a tiny little paint brush for embossing to get away any of the powder that might be excess sticking onto the paper or onto things you don't want it to be embossed. So I do that and just brush away any elements that I don't want embossed. And then I heat set. and you don't want to overheat set. You want to do it just until that powder melts and gets a little shiny with the light. Then you know it's all ready to, you're finished with it. And leave it set just for about a minute, maybe a couple of minutes, and it will be, you'll feel the texture and you'll see the shine. Now I'm die cutting this using Deckle and Stitches nesting dies by Unity, and this is smaller than the card base. I didn't want to add any additional layers because I just wanted this scene to be the main focal point of the card. And so I just placed that scene with flat double-sided tape onto the card base. And then the only thing I did extra was add a sentiment. I just forgot to leave room for the sentiment in the sky, but you can just add that directly to the card base if you plan a space for it. I made a blooper there. I got some ink on the side of my card, and this is just a way to fix it. I have a sand eraser, a mono sand eraser, and if you just gently go over any ink spots or anything that gets on your card, you can just erase it away. It's wonderful. And so there you go. I hope you guys give it a try. And I hope you try this yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and you have a lovely day.